Hello everyone and welcome to Whiskey Wednesday. Unusually, whiskey is a bit of an unusual thing as a whole. I've already said unusual far more times than I wanted to, but working in regular retail, we have access to quite a large amount of stock from many brands, but most products that are available exclusively to travel retail, we rarely see. Now, one of the problems I had as a bourbon fan was trying to get hold of the original bottle of this stuff, which came in a much more angular bottle. It was a little bit fatter around the sides, and that was the original Maker's Mark Cask Strength. Luckily, when I came back from Canada last year, managed to pick up a bottle of the original one in duty-free in London. Now, they have taken it out of duty-free, they've brought it into the regular retail marketplace, and I can happily talk to you about it. This is batch 20-01, so batch 1 of 2020, that's why I assume that means. 110.1 proof or 55.05% alcohol. Beautiful classic red wax top. This one's slightly over waxed. Quite well into the bottle by this point. I got this on the same weekend that a friend came back from his army training, so we did quite a large amount of this bottle. But there's a full one next to it just for scale with slightly less wax on it. This is the classic Maker's Mark mash bill, that big wheated cocoa driven recipe. When I first opened this when I got it, the booze was particularly intense. It was very, very forward, which isn't something associated with Maker's Mark. Typically they use a wheated style because it's softer, it's not as intense as rye can be, and even at higher alcohols, Maker's Mark is normally very maple driven, very syrupy. This just had a bit of a kick on it. I think at the time I'd only been drinking like 40% blended whiskies like Johnnie Walker Black Label and J&B Rare at home. I hadn't been drinking much at the time, so I think the booze just hit me a bit intensely. But it has mellowed out to be one of the most kind of sumptuous, delicious bourbons that I've tried in a long time. So the classic Maker's Mark mash bill with a higher ABV, now fully available for most people in the UK, coming in around £70 a bottle, which given most of the cask strength bourbons like Booker's, kind of fits in that price point. Wild Turkey Rare Breed is perhaps maybe 10% cheaper. Comes anywhere between like 53 to about 63 pounds depending on where you shop with, but in the grand scheme of cask strength bourbon I think it's still relatively affordable, and if you are a Maker's Mark fan it's just easier to get now. You don't have to go on holiday to do it, which already works out cheaper, right? So let's smell it, let's taste it, let's score it. Instantly off the nose we get four things. Tobacco leaf, almost like it's on the stem of the plant. I've had the opportunity to walk through tobacco fields and there is that beautiful earthy sweetness with it all. Maple syrup, which we've already sort of touched on, big, thick, heavy and dense. There's a slight condensed milk note to it. You can almost maybe call it a fudginess. And then that wonderful, almost like cocoa note that I always get from wheated bourbons, from Maker's Mark, from Weller, from Bernheim. Just has that in abundances. Old-fashioned cocktails, slightly bitter vermouth, slightly kind of darker bitter strains like dark cherry, Seville oranges, brown sugar, and a slight popcorn note to it too, almost like slightly salty popcorn. Certainly different from a Maker's Mark. It comes in now the same bottle that the regular one does, it just has a slightly different label, obviously, and it's a higher ABV and a higher price. But yeah, full of those big, sweet, wonderful bourbon dessert smells with a slight bitter twist on it. The black cherries really kicking up now. This in a Manhattan I think would be honestly quite incredible. I'm probably going to make one of those when we go home after this. But alluring, welcoming, what we want from a bourbon, packs all the fun stuff from a bourbon into a glass. Taste-wise, so much more fruit driven than the nose. In the, what was it we did? In the Abasolo video, the Mexican whiskey video, we touched on long fermentation times. And I mentioned in the past that Maker's Mark do have a particularly long fermentation time. and it gives you much more of a fruitier note to things. And the leading two notes on this when you taste it are apple and blackberry. Big, rich orchid and bramble fruits. Very British to a degree. They grow all over the world, but I think apple and blackberry, I always think of like UK summertime. Assisted by loads of brown sugar, a little bit of maple syrup. There's a slight pine note coming through there, but that can kind of be associated with sap, maple, mintiness. Finish, that tobacco note comes rolling back through. Nice and sweet, slightly earthy, a nice savoury contrast to everything. And then that slight syrupy, sweet and bitter note that you get from black cherries, specifically like Rosso vermouth. Stunning, beautiful. I could drink this all night. I won't though, because we've got other things to do. But one more taste and then we'll score it. It's probably the worst kept secret in the world that I like bourbon, and specifically Maker's Mark. The videos we've done in the past would obviously amplify that idea. This is a wonderful whiskey, and I'm so happy that it's now available for everyday people to walk into a retailer to be able to buy it off the shelf, because beforehand it was just such a, not an annoyance, but a difficulty to get, going through an airport and then keeping it in your bag and then making sure it's safe for the flight back and all that kind of thing. I hate doing that with whiskey. It's much easier to walk into a retailer anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, and just be like, I want one of these, and it's done. Thankfully, we can now do that with this. I really like it. I don't know if the fill level on the bottle kind of gave you an idea that I really like it, but it is something I've been drinking a lot of at home. Just one glass of this a night really just mellows me out, and it's all I need. And it is particularly tasty. Whether or not that'll be the same case in the next batch, I don't know. But I'm going to be bold here, and some of you might disagree, but I'm going to give that a 9. It's delicious, it's well-rounded, it does everything I want it to do, and it's now available, which is the most important thing. Some of you may disagree with the scoring, just because it's very subjective, but I'm going to easily say that is a 9 out of 10 as a bourbon fan. Maybe it wasn't a surprise, I don't know. I'll leave that to you guys to think about. But thank you all for watching. This is Whiskey Wednesday. I'm Phil, and this is Maker's Mark Cask Strength. We'll see you all next week.